In 1996, at a launch party for a new painkiller, Richard Sackler, heir to one of America's wealthiest pharmaceutical dynasties, stood up to give a speech. He told the room that the launch of their new drug would be followed by a blizzard of prescriptions that will bury the competition. The drug was Oxycontin. Over the next 25 years, nearly 500,000 Americans died from opioid overdoses. The epidemic spawned by that drug destroyed communities, collapsed families, and created a second wave of death when addicts, cut off from prescriptions, turned to heroin, and then fentanyl, a drug 100 times more potent than morphine, now killing more Americans annually than car accidents, guns, and HIV combined. The Sackler family, which privately owned Purdue Pharma and collected every dollar of its profits, extracted an estimated $35 billion from the company before it filed for bankruptcy. They kept the money. This is the story of how they did it. Not the broad strokes you've seen in documentaries. The specific decisions, the specific emails, the specific moment they were given a chance to stop and chose not to. To understand Oxycontin, you need to understand the one claim that made it a blockbuster. Before Oxycontin, powerful opioid painkillers existed, but they were largely restricted to cancer patients and life care. The medical community understood they were addictive, and that addiction was the price of using them for chronic, non-terminal pain. The risk was considered too high for widespread prescription. Purdue's solution was elegant in its simplicity. Oxycontin had an extended-release formulation, meaning the oxycodone was released slowly over 12 hours, rather than all at once. Purdue told doctors, patients, and regulators that this slow release fundamentally changed the drug's addiction profile. Because the drug entered the bloodstream gradually, they claimed, patients didn't experience the rush that drove addictive behavior. It was, in their marketing materials, safer than existing alternatives. This claim was the foundation of everything. Without it, Oxycontin was just another powerful opioid. With it, it was a revolution. A drug that could finally treat the millions of Americans suffering from chronic pain without the addiction risk that had previously made doctors hesitant. Purdue knew two things that their doctors did not. First, the extended release claim was only valid if patients took the pill whole. Crushing or chewing it, extremely common behavior, released the full dose immediately, delivering a euphoric rush as powerful as heroin. Purdue knew this. It was not a surprise discovery. It was a known property of the formulation. Second, even taken correctly, Oxycontin caused physical dependence in a significant portion of patients. This was documented in clinical trials. A clinical trial in elderly osteoarthritis patients showed that approximately 82% experienced adverse events related to the treatment. Yet Purdue concluded the drug was safe and effective. Armed with the slow-release claim, Purdue deployed aggressive marketing tactics, enticing doctors with free trips to pain management seminars, effectively all expenses paid vacations, and paid speaking engagements. Sales representatives were paid bonuses based on prescription volume. The message delivered to doctors across America was uniform and unambiguous. Oxycontin is not like opioids. You can prescribe it widely. The addiction risk is not what you think. In its first year, Oxycontin hit its sales targets 4 months early. Here is the question at the center of this story. When did Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family know that Oxycontin was causing widespread addiction? And what did they do when they found out? The documents answer that question with uncomfortable clarity. By 1997, 1 year after launch, concerns were already being raised by pharmacy benefit managers that Oxycontin was being abused. In an internal email that was later unsealed in court, Richard Sackler responded to those concerns by writing that addiction may be, in his words, a convenient way to just say no. His recommendation was to find a way to eliminate the objection and expand market access. He was not treating addiction as a safety crisis to be investigated. He was treating it as a sales obstacle to be overcome. By 2000, the Sackler family became aware of widespread abuse of Oxycontin, as it was reported in the press. By that point, the drug was generating over $1 billion a year in revenue. In 2001, internal Purdue documents showed that sales representatives were being instructed to tell doctors that only patients with an addictive personality became addicted, implying that the drug itself was not the problem and that high-functioning patients could take it safely. This framing was deliberate. It shifted moral and medical responsibility from the drug onto the patient. People weren't getting addicted because something was wrong with them. In 2007, Purdue Pharma pleaded guilty to felony charges of misbranding OxyContin, paying more than $600 million in criminal penalties. That should have been the end. Oh, it wasn't even a pause. The $600 million fine is the fact most people know about Purdue Pharma. It sounds enormous. It sounds like accountability. Here is the context. In the year the fine was paid, Purdue's annual from OxyContin alone was approximately $2 billion. The fine amounted to roughly 4 months of sales. 3 executives pleaded guilty. None went to prison. And then Purdue kept selling. After the 2007 guilty plea, Purdue's marketing campaign didn't stop. It went underground. The company spent the next decade misleading the DEA, defrauding the United States, and paying kickbacks to companies that steered patients onto OxyContin. In 2008, they launched a new program called the OxyContin Savings Card, a discount scheme offering patients their first 5 prescriptions at reduced cost. Internal company data showed these discounts led to 60% more patients staying on OxyContin for longer than 90 days. Purdue's own court filings described it as the teaser rate on a long-term and very high-stakes mortgage. Read that again. They compared their discount program for a highly addictive opioid to a predatory mortgage product, designed to hook people in before the real cost became apparent. They used that language internally. And then they launched the program anyway. Meanwhile, Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Haley's lawsuit claimed that 8 members of the Sackler family were personally responsible for deceptive sales practices and had micromanaged a deceptive sales campaign. Then came the email that a congressional chairwoman read aloud in a 2019 hearing. In September 2014, Mortimer Sackler emailed that Purdue was in a death spiral. Jonathan Sackler responded, "We've taken a fantastic amount of money out of the company." Their company was dying. People were dying. And the family's recorded response was satisfaction at how much money they had extracted before the end. This story is sometimes told as a tale of one evil company. That framing is too comfortable. It lets too many people off the hook.
Purdue did not operate in a vacuum. They built an ecosystem. At the peak of their sales and marketing operation, Purdue hired 3,000 doctors to serve on their speakers bureau, paying them to give talks promoting OxyContin to other physicians. These were not fringe doctors. They included department chairs at major hospitals, pain management specialists whose endorsements carried real weight with prescribers. The medical profession's credibility was, in effect, rented.
They funded pain advocacy organizations that lobbied for aggressive opioid prescribing and fought attempts to tighten regulations. The American Pain Foundation, which presented itself as a patient advocacy group, received the vast majority of its funding from opioid manufacturers. It dissolved the same week as Senate investigation announced it was looking into pharmaceutical industry funding of advocacy organizations. What a coincidence. The FDA, which approved OxyContin's original label, claiming lower abuse potential, operated with a post-marketing review system rather than pre-market scrutiny of promotional claims. Purdue submitted a video advertisement to the FDA that the FDA didn't review until a year later, when it was probed by the Government Accounting Office, at which point the FDA identified false claims and issued letters to Purdue. A year of false claims, then letters. The system that was supposed to catch this was understaffed, out-resourced, and operating without the legal infrastructure to move at anything approaching the Purdue sales force. When OxyContin prescriptions were finally curtailed through state investigations, new prescribing guidelines, and reformulations that made the pills harder to crush, hundreds of thousands of people were already physically dependent on opioids. They didn't stop needing opioids. They just couldn't get them legally anymore. The opioid crisis unfolded in 3 waves. First, the rise in deaths from prescription opioids in the early 2000s. Second, a rise in heroin usage around 2010 as prescriptions became harder to access. Third, a rise in synthetic opioid deaths from fentanyl beginning in 2013. Each wave was a direct downstream consequence of the first. Purdue created a population of opioid-dependent people. Then the prescription market collapsed under them, and the illegal drug market filled the gap with progressively cheaper and more lethal alternatives. The fentanyl killing over 100,000 Americans a year right now. Right now, as you watch this video, is, in a direct chain of causation, a consequence of decisions made in Purdue Pharma boardrooms in the mid-1990s. The defense offered by Purdue and the Sackley has rested on several claims, but OxyContin was a legitimate medication that helped genuine pain sufferers, that the abuse was caused by a small number of bad faith patients and rogue prescribers, that the company acted in good faith given available information. These claims deserve honest assessment. OxyContin did help some patients with legitimate severe chronic pain. That is true and worth acknowledging. The opioid crisis is not simply the story of a useless drug pushed on innocent people. It is the story of a genuinely useful drug whose risks were systematically misrepresented so that it could be sold far beyond the population for whom those risks might be acceptable. The bad faith patient's defense is demolished by the internal documents. The company knew the abuse patterns. They characterized addiction as a sales obstacle. They designed discount programs to create dependency. This was not an unfortunate outcome blindsided by. On October 21st, 2020, Purdue reached a settlement admitting it, and these are the exact words from the legal filing. Knowingly and intentionally conspired and agreed with others to aid and abet doctors dispensing medication without a legitimate medical purpose. That is not ambiguous language. That is a confession. The Sackler family extracted over $35 billion from Purdue Pharma. The company filed for bankruptcy. The settlements reached leave the family with billions remaining. No member of the Sackler family has served a day in prison for what the company they controlled, and personally directed, admitted to doing. Their names, once affixed to hospitals, universities, museums and galleries across the world, have in almost every case been removed. The Louvre, the Tate, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the reputational reckoning came. The legal reckoning has not. 500,000 people are dead. The people who knew, who documented their own knowledge in writing, who designed programs internally compared to predatory lending, who called the carnage a death spiral and congratulated themselves for how much they'd extracted before it ended, are among the wealthiest people alive. We know this because the documents exist. The emails are in the congressional record. The guilty pleas are filed. The admission of conspiracy is signed. Knowing is not the same as accountability. We have learned that repeatedly, in this story and in others. The question that doesn't have an answer yet is a simple one. At what point does documented knowledge of mass harm, followed by no meaningful consequence, stop being a failure of the legal system and become something more deliberate than failure? I don't have that answer. I think we should be more uncomfortable than we are that we don't.